Before you watch or listen, we recommend taking a moment to read the podcast description for important context.
Welcome everyone. I welcome you to the next episode of Coffee and Pie, Coffee and Political Islam, together with Israeli historian Udi Manor, professor experienced in specifically beginnings of the State of Israel. And because we dedicated quite a significant portion of our time in the last months to the State of Israel on the anniversary of 7th of October, and we published a lecture from Marco Moshe Bumagin. You can look in the description of the video on the legal foundation of the State of Israel. Let's look on the historical background of that foundation, but also I know about Udi that he's interested and he studied quite intensively the sentiments and the opinions and the feelings of the Jews living outside of Israel. Udi is also guest of many TV stations and radio stations, and he speaks about the history because, and that, please correct me, Udi, if it's not true, but you believe that knowing the history determines the future of any country, of any society, of any collective. So please, if you can fill in what I forgot to mention on the beginning. We had also the meeting some time ago and discussed many things in depth, and I was fascinated by his knowledge. And the only possibility to bring this knowledge to you is, of course, to invite Udi to our podcast. So welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this move. It's a good opportunity to, to express some thoughts and some, understandings about Israel, about the Jewish people, about the conflict, about, the future maybe, even though I'm an historian, so I'm obliged to say I have always using the same joke that on the entrance to the studio, my crystal ball fell and broke out, so I couldn't tell the future today. Maybe tomorrow I'll buy an AliExpress a new crystal ball, but usually historians are not talking about the future. On the other hand, as you said, and it's not my invention, I think every culture knows that, if you are human beings, I mean, sharks doesn't have written or even oral history, I guess. Sharks are there for about 300 million years without a real change, but humans all the time are changing. So the change is the constant, the permanent factor of human life. So if someone wants to understand how we get along, I mean, in our case, what is the roots of the conflict and what is the future of Israel in this region, vis-a-vis the Islam and the political Islam and the non-political Islam, maybe if there is such thing as a non-political Islam. So you must understand the present has evolved from the past. And then if you want to guess about the future, good for you. I mean, I wouldn't guess. I have hopes. I have speculations. I have educated guesses, but no predictions. So this would be like an introduction regarding my methodology. I can add one more thing because, on the one hand, I think most humans will agree, even the lazy ones that wouldn't take one book, wouldn't, invest 1 second of the time of reading, even not listening to YouTubes or podcasts, but they will agree with us that knowing the past is a key to understand the present, and the present is like the evolving future. Very good.
Exactly.
Having said that, of course, historians sometimes are quarreling among themselves, not only about interpretation, but also about facts. I'm on the one hand in favor of doubting things. On the other hand, I really appreciate people that putting their doubts, first of all, in a proper context, and second of all, in relation to facts. And then you can analyze which interpretation makes more sense. In the case of the Jewish-Arab conflict, it's quite simple. If you take all the facts that are very known, you don't have to dig in.
Maybe for our audience, I would like to ask you to condense those facts. We have the State of Israel, established, recognized. Right now in the Middle East, it's being there, And what are the facts about the foundation of the State of Israel, and what is the history? Because you also elaborated how the Jews came to the idea to found the State of Israel, that it was, the idea came not like this. It was a process. It was a thinking process. Yeah. So let's maybe go to this, and then we will naturally come to the conflict.
Okay, so what you're asking from me, it's a big, huge task that requires hours. It's not a way of saying that I'm going to avoid. I'm just going to say that from start. I mean that I will not be able to represent not only all the relevant facts, but even I wouldn't be able to go into depth into the different concepts or perspectives of the parties involved in this issue. I just want to mention one. I will start with the Arabs. From the classical Arab point of view, both Christian Arabs and of course the majority, which is Muslim, the Zionist project is an invasion of Western civilization or Western imperialism into what they consider the Arab land, which goes all the way from Morocco near the Atlantic Ocean all the way to the Gulf. It's like saying that in South America, you have a vast majority of Spanish-speaking Catholics, okay? So from this point of view, it's obvious that Korean immigrants in South America are a minority that are like, would be like the guests. They can be citizens, but no one would even consider to think that one day Brazil will be Korean with Korean culture.
I'm now recording. Actually, I recorded month and a half ago, specifically a podcast with one of the Christians who is living and traveling to Iraq. And it's incredible. And I'm speaking with the Copt Christians in Egypt. It's incredible. At the same time, from all of those people is coming back that the influence on Christianity and Christians from the side of political Islam is immense. In many cases, Christians submitted to the narrative, to the Islamic narrative of the country, because imagine living century after century after century after century after century in the submission, not being able to go to the higher positions in the government, not being able to, for example, build the churches, not being able to preach the gospels outside of the church, not being able to be recognizable on the street, not to wear the crosses. And it's always coming and going. Of course, sometimes it's possible, sometimes not. But ultimately, to live such a long time under submission of political Islam, it changes your perspective. And I think that's one of the case when we speak about the Christian Arabs, specifically who live in the Palestinian territories now, what we have within Israel, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I think, one of the things that you start to adopt a mentality. It's like, in many cases, I think it's like that you start to somehow apologize the oppressing force within yourself, and that you can live with yourself. I mean, okay, that's my suggestion how it is, because living under an Islamic country, Islamic state, and Islamic rule, being a Christian for a long time, you need to find some defense system within yourself. And because Christians living specifically in the area where is now Israel should be all hands for Israel. All hands.
Yeah.
Because in the scriptures, Islamic scriptures is very clearly defined that the Christians are people of the book, and the people of the book, they have to adhere to the Quran, to the Muhammad as the last prophet. And if they do not, they are the kafirs, non-Muslims, and they should be eliminated or convert. Yet that's actually not really logical for Christians to support in any way Palestinian Authority or Hamas or the independence of the Palestinian territories. It just makes no sense. Okay, just wanted to make a point because you spoke about.
Yeah. But let me go back to the previous, your first question. I was going to go deeper, relatively deeper, to the causes of the Jewish people to adopt Zionism, and
Please.
then Zionism is the base of the state of Israel. And then I said before, I'm going to talk about the Jewish point of view. I mean, the mainstream Jewish point of view, because there are others points of view. We saw it last week with 30% of Jewish population of New York voting for.
Can you imagine?
Yeah. It's I can imagine.
Can you imagine?
I can imagine, because my PhD was dedicated to this sort of Jews even though in a very much more, let's say, a moderate context. I'm talking about New York in the late 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, where many Jews were adopting non-Zionist and even anti peoplehood notion of the Jewish people, claiming the Jews are not a nation, but not even an ethnic group, but only a religion or socialist, you know, laborers. But let me go back to again where I'm. So before going deep into the relatively deep into the Jewish perspective of how Israel was born, what is Zionism, I just want to mention that from the Arab Muslim point of view, the whole Zionist project is an invasion made possible by, you know, Balfour Declaration and later by the Americans, and so it's from their point of view, it is no such thing as legitimate Zionism, hence even legitimate state of Israel, even in the boundaries of my department in Haifa. Let's say the state of Israel will be confined to my 80 square meters here in Haifa. So we give up Tel Aviv, let alone Jerusalem, Al-Quds, and we are expecting the political Islam to acknowledge Resolution 181 of the UN in 1947, and to fulfill it in a very small portion of the great Arab land, which is my apartment in Haifa. Even that is conceived as illegitimate from the point of view of political Islam. Now, speaking about Christians, some of my neighbors here in Haifa, in my very neighborhood, are Christians. I don't know if they know, but I know because I'm an historian, that their grandparents, some 100 years ago, were the most fervent, fanatic Palestinian nationalists. Before it was called PLO, it was even before the Mufti. Talk about the beginning of the 20th century, especially in Haifa and also in Yafo. The Christians, the Arab Christians, were leading a nationalistic Arab local movement vis-a-vis what was back then very, very weak Zionist movement here in the land of Israel. I will try not to use the term Palestine because I'm a Jewish person, so I will use either Eretz Israel, which is in Hebrew, or the land of Israel, which figures as such in the old text. Anyway, so the Arab Christians back then hoped that by moving forward from religion, theological concept or mindset to a nationalistic, modern nationalistic mindset, they would be on par, on equal terms with their Arab Muslims neighbors against the Jewish threat.
But then you have two motivations, right? On one side, you have the Islamic political motivation.
Yeah.
And from that, it sounds like how you describe the Christian Arabs, it's more like national...
Self-deceit. It was a self-deceit. Today they know it. They wouldn't say it out loud. But the fact is very simple. The only country in the Middle East where the Christian community is thriving both culturally and socially and professionally and economically, you wouldn't believe. And the best high schools in Israel with the best results here in Haifa, Christians, Arab Christian. So they should have, there are some of them that are outspeaking their gratitude to the very fact that the state of Israel exists. But even if they're not saying it because they're, as you described it perfectly before, because they have like this minority mentality. Who better than the Jews know what is a minority mentality? The Druze also, the Armenians also have it, okay? But the Jews are, the experts. So the Arab Christians today in Israel, or the last 100 years, they have this dual dual morality, so to speak, or the minority mentality, as I mentioned before. So they wouldn't go out, openly and say, thank you, the state of Israel. But the facts are facts. Beit Lechem, what you call in English, maybe Latin, Belen, no, in Spanish, Belen, how do you call it? The famous city of where Jesus was born, Beit Lechem. Bethlehem, okay?
Yep.
It used to be about 95% Christians. Today, the number is close to zero. Beit Jala, the same.
All the Christians listening now to that podcast, please wake up, because there are different motives, and it may seem on the outside, specifically the Christians living in the Middle East, that it is similar. But if you go deeper into the scriptures, you understand that the ultimate goal of the Islamic politics is a global world dominion. And there is no space for Christians, there is no space for Jews. Only under certain conditions, which is adoption of what I said before, that Muhammad is your final prophet. If not, then you are not a Christian, Islamic Christian, because there is a concept of Islamic Jews and Christians. So-called people of the book, but I suppose that no Christian, no Jew would ever accept that terms.
Yeah, I used to. I just one more remark before I go deeper to what I promised about 15 minutes ago. It's interesting where we're going in circles, but I hope our listeners are having the enough patience to understand that it's important, and that to know, knowing that we're going to go back to the. But just one more. I used to think, as an historian, as a student, actually, that the famous Omar regulations made by Islam in the Middle Ages, it's either there were two forms of understanding it. From I'm a modern person. I'm liberal in my values. Equal rights for women, and tolerance, and science, and secularism, etc. I mean, so for me it was either an issue of the Middle Ages. Many strange things happened in the Middle Ages. They were burning beautiful women because they thought they're witches. So today, beautiful women have even an advantage. No one suspects them of being witches. So something from the past, from the Middle Ages, went off. So also the Omar regulation. Or the other concept was that, it's only words. The rulers put the Omar regulation, but in fact, no one was applying it. Today, I know, in the last 20 years, I'm dedicating most of my scholarly energy to understand better the conflict, because in the beginning, when I started my PhD, I was dealing with those Jews in New York 120 years ago. I was really into the issues of socialism and communism, social democracy. I was really into the issue of economy, which is, I think it's very important. I think everyone thinks it knows that it's very important. But my inclination was to put economy above all. From a material point of view, you can imagine Arab rulers 1,000 years ago doing their math, and they weren't stupid. And they say, okay, we have a very small minority of Jews that knows 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7, or 8 languages, and they know to write. And you have Christians that they are very strong in, you name it, okay, either industry or administration. So on the one hand, yes, of course, we the Muslim want everyone to be Muslim, blah blah blah. But on the other hand, we need, on terms of expediency, the possible contribution of both Christians and Jews. Hence, we're going to tolerate them. So for me, it was an obvious thing. Now, of course, in history, there were long periods of tolerance between Jews, from Muslims toward Jews or Christians.
And I would say to that we call it, and actually there is a concept for this, which is called dhimmi. That's the concept. So the Christians and Jews living under Islamic country. But as you said, it was a pragmatic thing to do, because all of the resources what Christians and the Jews were building up were usually used for extending and enlarging the Islamic empires. So it was I would not use the word tolerance. I would use some other word, maybe some Because if you think about jizya and 50% on the tax on the property tax, etc., which was put upon the dhimmis, who practically financed an Islamic empire within the borders of that specific Islamic land. I'm not sure if I would go as far as with the words of tolerance, but I understand.
No, absolutely. That's my point. I was judging. I was trying to understand Middle Ages using my modern mindset. I was raised by my parents and my teachers and my friends and by TV and Jewish literature and Israeli and Hebrew, tolerance. And I really try to tolerate even the stupid people that don't want to think. It's the hardest thing to do. Okay. So
and Udi is very direct as well.
Yeah,
Udi is, what I like about Udi is he says that all, and he says that immediately into your face.
Yeah, and I tell you what, and the issue is no one is born stupid. It's a question of choosing, of not using the present that God gave you. No, the brain. I mean, the common sense is as simple as that. To use the common sense that unite all the other senses: seeing, watching, reading, thinking, etc. So I was going back to the very long moment when I was stupid, really stupid, trying to understand both Middle Ages and, which is more important, the actual Muslim world in my terms. So if I am a tolerate to my neighbor, that okay, so I must be tolerant to any, and it makes me blind. So let's go back to Omar regulations. They mean it today. In the best case, if Europe will go on the road it's on right now, okay, so the veteran European, so to speak, the original European, so to speak, okay, I don't know, the 100 different ethnic groups, Serbs, and I don't have to tell you about Europe. So they will be, in the best case, under Omar regulations. It's not a joke for the political Islam. So
for all the listeners, I'm putting now a link down below when we speak now to the Umar Treaty, so that you can click on that and read it.
Yeah, okay, that's very important, because believe me, I didn't know about it until I was about to finish my first university degree. And it's amazing, because you should teach it in Israel. You should teach it in kindergarten. I'm not going into the didactics. I mean, how do you teach a 7 years old this kind of? But it's not the point. At least their teachers must know it. No one, you can hardly read anything about it in the common newspapers in Israel or on the culture, because we are coming from a culture. The Jewish culture is very open, is very critic. Okay, it's very optimistic, it's very positive, and this is the right moment to go into the question that your first question.
Treasure life. You treasure life.
Yeah, we treasure life, and then from those values, we can go back to the first question of yours. What is Zionism about, and how Jews arrived to this conclusion? So let me summarize it in one concept, and then I'll play with this concept: emancipation. The promise of emancipation. Emancipation is a word that comes from Latin, already in the Roman Empire, in the times of the Roman Empire. Emancipation was a legal act of the father making his son equal citizen. It comes from the word money, which is not money, but mano, hand. Okay, emancipation, I'm sending you. It's like pushing your kid. Until now, you were under my protection. From now on, you are on your own. So the term emancipation in the context of the 19th century or late 18th century has to do with the revolutions, the national revolution all over Europe, starting, let's say, with the French Revolution, and then goes all the way to the Russian Revolution 120 years later. So emancipation was about granting all people civil rights. So all people includes also Jews. And guess what? Amazingly, no, surprise, surprise, most Jews, not all Jews, okay, but most Jews were extremely more happy than anyone else. Whereas some French revolutionaries were, doubting how it's going to work. I mean, because, okay, so we have civil rights, equal civil rights. So this means that also women will go to vote. No, women started to vote in France 150 years after the French Revolution. So it wasn't straightforward. And until 1848, only people that were paying taxes in France were allowed to cast a vote. So emancipation wasn't taken for granted as an obvious, straightforward concept. But for Jews, surprise, surprise, happily ever after. No more persecution, no more ghettos, no more marginalization, no more persecution, I said, and that's it. Now we're going to be French. No, there was a joke in the 19th century, a political joke, not very funny, but very deep. No, that when a person meets a person, asks him, "What are you? A German, a Slav, Italian?" And he says, "Okay." He says, if he says, "I'm a cosmopolitan," so he said, "Okay, so I know that you're a Jew," because every British or English liberal was English before he was liberal, and then he could be also conservative. And then in Germany, it could be social democrat, and could be Christian democrat, it could be whatever. But he was German, even though German identity.
You also wrote in many of your works that what I understood that the Jews in those times were not really so much involved in the governance of the countries. That it was not really the thing what the Jewish community did. It was rather, as you said, all together in the ghetto and doing the business and being involved in other things, trade, but not really so much in the state square.
Absolutely. And then all of a sudden, all over Europe, all over the 19th century, you see the presence of Jews in politics, in local politics, local meaning in Dutch or in France, in France or in Germany or in Russia. You can name, the famous, Trotsky is the most famous Jew. He wasn't hiding his Judaism. In the case of England, you can talk about the Israeli that was born Jew, and he decided to convert into Christianity in order to have less obstacles on his way up. And the same did the father of Karl Marx. When Karl Marx was 6 years old, no one knew that he's going to be Karl Marx. But his father was a lawyer, and he knew that as a Jew, he couldn't litigate. He couldn't go into the German courts because he had to sworn on a New Testament, and he was a Jew. So people say if a lawyer enters court and make how do you say perjury, making his swearing on the New Testament, so who's going to believe him? So Mr. Marx, I forgot his name, the father, couldn't go into court. So he was a lawyer, but he was a limited lawyer. So when Karl, his son, was 6 years old in the year of 1824, he took him to the church and baptized him in order to his son have less problems if we in one day want to be a lawyer like him. And his grandfather, Karl Marx was a rabbi in Trier, in this beautiful city in the west of Germany of today. Okay, so yes, so emancipation was warmly adopted by many Jews, so much so that some of them even invented the new theology known today as Reform Judaism. This is the basis for those 30% of Jews that voted.
I was thinking, I would like to come to that for sure, because I think absolutely. Now the listeners, when we publish this podcast, I think it will be not exactly at the time, it will take some time, but when you are listening to that, that's a historic background of what happened in New York, because those questions popping up, but it's usually hidden somewhere in the corners of the internet. But now let's bring it up, why it happened and why the Jews are okay to vote for a person like that?
Yeah. So if we start, we touch this issue, let's move 20 meters farther on this road. After Second World War, after the atrocities of the Nazi regime in Europe, after Jews, some Reformed Jews, I'm insisting on putting the emphasis on some, because it's not all. It's always a question of, it's very complex, not, if not very, at least it's complex. There is a diversity also within the Reform movement. Just to make a long story short, there are Reform settlements of Jewish Reform in Israel. So the Reform can be Zionist. But talking about the mainstream, especially in the 19th century, there's no question for them. There's no such thing as a Jewish people. Jews belong to a religion which is known as Judaism. And since we are in the 19th century, we have science, we have whatever, have the development, we have parliament, democracy, we have liberalism, etc. So we have to rearrange our religion, in one word, to reform it. And this is Reform Judaism that was born in Central Europe in the beginning of the 19th century. Then it was crystallized in the 1840s, and then it found heaven in the United States from the middle 19th century on. So after the Holocaust, after the Shoah, after the Jewish genocide in the Second World War, some Jewish Reform thinkers in the US were saying we have to recreate, even reshape, or redefine our identity, and to clean up ourselves from any sort of race concept, because racism is what brought us to Auschwitz. Hence, we have to develop a notion that we in the United States, just like tens of thousands of different Reform Christian denominations, Baptist, Anabaptist, Black, the gospel, whatever. So the First Amendment of the American Constitution permits every person to redefine himself, to put a name, to denominate his way of thinking of God, because in the dollar bill it says, "In God we trust." It doesn't say in which God we trust, or in which form of godly scripture we trust. So on the one hand, we all God believers. This would be the American way of thinking. On the other hand, we are tolerant to any sort of religion, providing that we are all Americans. So we're not Jewish Americans, we're American of Jewish religion.
Maybe that's one of the problems why the United States were so embracing of Islamic scriptures, because
toleration. Because
the concept there, but I think that one of the core things to understand is to study the Islamic God, and also understanding that Islam is not just a religion, it's a complete civilizational system. But this is a different talk. What I mean is that also explains what you are saying. It explains also this, I would say, general naivete in the society on the beginning, because you are in this excitement about let's be tolerant. But the problem is, if you start to be tolerant to something which is not tolerant, and then it wants to consume your country, your constitution, actually reshape it, and again turn it potentially to the Pact of Umar. Yeah, so
absolutely, and this is, I mean, if you are adopting tolerance as your only mindset, on the only pillar of your mindset, it's beyond naivete. You're starting to lie to yourself, because tolerance as a concept was born, as a political concept, was born in Europe around Augsburg Pact and the Westphalia Agreement or Covenant. I don't remember the name, but 1555, the Augsburg and peace, and then 1648. If you go to Germany, there is a very nice city that I forgot now. I'm sorry, it's on the west, very famous. It's slipped my mind. There is a place where the Westphalia peace was signed. So it's like a pillar of the European community, because tolerance, it doesn't mean that the Belgians likes the Germans or even the Westphalians like the Bavarians. It's not a question of love. It's a question of tolerant political tolerance, which means we live in a liberal mindset. So this project is more or less working in Europe and in South America, North America. It doesn't work in the Middle East, and which is more important for people who try to understand humanity beyond, putting names, Europe or Asia, or this or that history, trying to understand the human experience. Tolerance is one aspect of humanity. Historians must, it's like, just like mechanics or engineers, you want to build a bridge, you have to understand the nature of metal, the nature of cement, the nature of the soil where you're going to put the Golden Gate Bridge. It's not a question, I believe, I have a dream that I will build a bridge. Very good, you have a dream, but you have to take into considerations what are the components of building a bridge, and by parallel. Okay, so if you want to have a better society, you have to understand what is the human, what is humans made of. And of course,
so now we are coming back to the time after the Second World War, when we stopped, and then we have this kind of.
What I was trying to say, that those people, those Jews in the United States after Second World War, they were lying to themselves. They were saying ethnicity is something from the past. Now we have to be like, Jimbaya, we have to embrace each other. And from this point of view, Zionism was like a thorn in the eye, because Zionism was all the way around. Yes, we want tolerant, we want to, Zionists would say, yes, of course, we want to be part of humanity, but we still, as Jews, must be suspicious before even counting the bodies of Auschwitz, regardless the genocide, obviously with the genocide, but even before the genocide. Let's go back to the 19th century, because on the one hand, you have many Jews that were embracing emancipation. On the other hand, there were Jews that they had two different reactions. One was anti-emancipation, which is the what is known today, a very wrong, very bad title, but I don't have time to go to correct titles. So the ultra-Orthodox Jews, you can see them in New York, in Belgium, in Germany also, of course, in Israel, there are about 10 or 12% of the population. Many there are big polemics around them, because most of them are not joining the Israeli army, and some of their leaders are saying worse things than this political Islam against the state of Israel. So this is another story that I wouldn't go right now, but because I want to talk about the other reaction to emancipation. So one reaction was anti-emancipation, and the other reaction, which leads us to Zionism, was auto-emancipation. Zionists, to sum it up, to cut a very long story short, using this term of emancipation, which is, everyone can use it. The Irish liberation movement were talking about emancipation. The Italians were talking about emancipation. The Czechs were talking about emancipation in the 19th century. So also Jews were saying the same. We want to be like Greece. We want to be like the Italians. We want to be like the Dutch, etc. We want to have our own auto-emancipation using the same nice ideas of the French Revolution, namely égalité, fraternité, and what skipped my mind, equally freedom, égalité, liberté, fraternité. Okay, but we want to make it within a Jewish context. Otherwise, in the best case scenario, Jews will disappear culturally, because they will adopt the local customs and the local cultures. And it's a fact. I mentioned before Karl Marx. His grandfather was a rabbi, and he was close to, some historians are calling him a very, very sardonic anti-Semite. So I don't have to go all the way to make Karl Marx anti-Semite, but there's no question that he forgot all about his Judaism, at least outspokenly. So the Zionist would say, in the best case, Jewish people is going to disappear culturally. In the worst case, our fate is, Herzl wrote it in his diary as early as 1895, 2 years before he established the Zionist, officially, the Zionist movement. Back then in Basel, in Switzerland, in August 1897, he's writing in his diary that he fears that in the very close future, in a generation, Jews will, 1/3 will disappear in terms of immigration or whatever cultural. 1/3 will be exterminated. So people are saying, yes, he predicted the Shoah. I don't believe in it because, it's not prediction. It's a speculation. It's an educated guess. Anyway, it's not the point if Herzl was a prophet or not. What my point is that this what was driving Zionism. So on the one hand, you can put it in, you can say negative. Okay, so fear of extermination, fear of persecution. Okay, on the positive side, you can say Zionism wanted to make a cultural renaissance. And the combination of both negative and positive aspects is to have your own auto-emancipation in your ancestral land, which is the land of Israel, hence Zionism. So
Interesting.
From now on, you can start talking about the realization of Zionism. Then you go into the details, the different types of settlements and the economy, and of course the British
No
mandate.
need. I think that you just covered the
Obviously.
motivation. That was important to actually show the motivation.
Absolutely.
That was the, let's say, the basis for understanding why the state of Israel was established from the Jewish point of view, from the Jewish brains and the hearts. What was the core idea to bring the state of Israel to be established? Again, please watch the video below from our colleague. He went specifically into the legal establishment of the land of Israel. We will not go into this today. What I'm interested in is you can see that now the Zionism, or the state of Israel and the statehood of Israel and the way how it was established, it actually became extremely critiqued on the left and the right side of the both political spectrum. So you see that also the Islamic propaganda from many Islamic countries, and very well financed, of course. You can see the universities and how you can see that on the anniversary of the 7th of October, many universities are hanging Palestinian flags and so on. It's not coming like that. And of course, also the youth is very strongly influenced by non-existent ideals, by an ideology which would like to annihilate the Jews eventually, and that the Israel as such should not be existent. So it's interesting to see that now, if you see on the PR level, public relations level, Israel, it's not doing so well. It's not doing so well internationally.
Understatement.
Yeah.
It's another understatement.
But it could also, I was always thinking why, and I think I hope it will come to that the representatives of the state of Israel will have to come to the conclusion what is the cause of the problem, the ultimate old but still very current cause, which is the political Islam and the scriptures. Because if you go into the Quran, if you go into the Hadith and into the life of Muhammad himself led decapitate between 600 and 900 Jews in one day and watched it with his wife from the sunrise to the sunset. That's in his biography. The thing what he did with the Jews and how he treated the Jews, it's something what should be an example. 89 times in the Quran it's mentioned that every single Muslim should imitate the example of Muhammad. So it's not like that Muhammad is a historical figure. He is today's example for the whole humanity. It's not for every single human being. And if you don't do that, you are to be converted either or annihilated. So, and then we are coming back to the question, 30% of the Jews voting for a mayor with an Islamic background. We know that the Islamic scriptures are containing more anti-Jewish text than Mein Kampf. Okay, so the Quran, Sirah, and the Hadith collectively contain more anti-Jewish text than Hitler's Mein Kampf. Okay, so why those Jews, before they cast the vote, do not ask some difficult questions to the mayor? Because it would be important to know, what is your view on certain things? Why they did it? Because you studied that. It would be interesting for the audience to know why we have a very different behavior from the Jews living outside of Israel than from the Jews living in the state of Israel. I don't know if the question is good. Maybe you can also correct the question.
No, it's
You can correct the question. Yeah.
I don't have to correct the question. Of course, every question can be the refined from this but the question is very good, and fortunately the answer is quite simple. One word: ignorance. They don't know what you're talking about. They don't know. I'm not talking only about those numbers, that 89 times, etc. Let me talk about myself. I read the Quran lately. I didn't read the Quran until I have to admit, I'm almost 65 years old. I'm in the business of trying to understand my present using the past, as I said before, one word. He's historian. Okay, so it's about I started studying seriously, let's say, when I was 15. So it's about 50 years, give and take. And I didn't make myself the time available to read the Quran. Of course I knew about it. Of course I can read encyclopedias. Of course I heard lectures and I read books of people that really, but read the Quran and see for yourself. I'm talking about the ideas that you mentioned. So going back to those Jews in the United States that voted for this Mamdani, they don't know those things. Even worse, even if they will know, even if you'll tell them, but my brothers and sisters, listen, this and this and that, the Hadith and the Quran and biography, etc. And listen to Michael Cook, and listen to Bernard Lewis, and listen to Chagai Horowitz, and listen to whatever. Okay, and listen even to Udi Manor. Never mind.
I wanted to mention that. Listen to Udi Manor now. You were quicker than I was.
And they will say, okay, so look who's talking. Okay, this center that you're representing is Islamophobe. They will tell you, Milan, you are Islamophobe.
And what I would tell to them is that the phobia, it's a medical definition. So it's a medical state which needs to be confirmed by the doctor, so on the psychiatric clinic. So usually if you are phobic of something, you are shaking, you are sitting in the corner and you cannot do anything. I don't perceive myself as shaking in the corner. How we are perceiving ourselves is that we are rationally concerned about politics of Islam, but also we understand that the Islamic community is the first victim. Imagine to be born. Yesterday we made some post about the women in Afghanistan. What choices do you have if you are born in such a political system? And people usually don't understand that from the Islamic point of view, you cannot divide the politics and the religion. It's all interwoven. It's one civilizational system. From the non-Islamic point of view, we can. That's why we speak about political Islam, because you can make the cut. You can say this verse, it's political because it's about non-Muslims. It has a political narrative. It has a political angle. From Islamic point of view, it's undividable. So I would actually encourage next time, hopefully as soon as possible, when the next election on the any mayor is happening with an Islamic background, to ask hard questions. What do you think about Muhammad? What about the Jews he killed between 600 and 900? What about the Quranic verses which speak about Jews in this and this way?
Milan, let's play the game. I can try. I can try as part of my profession. Try to understand. No, really, I'm not joking. Now it's serious. I mean, it's like being empathetic with the things you're dealing. I'll try to act as one of those Jews from New York, and I would tell you, for example, now not as a genuine Jew that voted from New York from several reasons. I'm not, but 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine in the U.S. sent me a YouTube where Ted Cruz, a senator, is inquiring the candidate of Donald Trump, no less, to be U.S. ambassador. I don't remember in Qatar or in Kuwait or in the Emirates. I don't remember his name. He was a mayor in one of the cities in the Midwest, maybe around Chicago. I'm not sure. I can go and dig the name. It's not the point. And this person in the past was worse than Mamdani in terms of things he said. He said that we have to take the Hamas as an exemplary movement of courage, etc. And Ted Cruz was quoting and asking what, it's a Senate inquiry. It's not like podcast. They're not talking like us, interrupting each other and blah. No, they're, straight to the point. And this guy was waving everything. Maybe I said it in the past. So he asked him, do you think today that Hamas, no, I'm against its violence. So actually he was answering all of his questions by non-answering at all. So it's a tactic that we know from politics. Now, let's go back to those Americans. If they talk to you about the Jewish Americans voted for Mamdani, and I'm not talking about one specific, I'm trying to guess what would be their mindset. How would they will justify the fact that they're voting? They said, we live in, I almost say, we live in a yellow submarine. It starts there, a very interesting interpretation that I read about the new left in the 1960s is that when they were singing, we all live in a yellow submarine, the right political forces of US took the White House. So the left, since the 1960s, it's about 60 years now, is living in a yellow submarine. In what term? Psychedelic world. They have those concepts of a world that doesn't exist. So they would tell you, Afghanistan, what? Shut up, not you. I mean, the Americans should be more modest because they ruined Afghanistan because of the invasion. Otherwise, everything would be cool. Or if not cool, it's authenticity, because they adore everything that is authentic. Your circumcised women in Africa, it's okay because it's authentic. If Arab,
by the way, please look below. I will also put a link when we speak about the female genital mutilation. We actually proven, our colleague was working very hard on that the female genital mutilation, it's coming from the Islamic doctrine. It is actually in the Islamic doctrine, and please watch the video. It's very important because the majority of the female genital mutilation in the world, it's actually of Islamic background. Or it's in the Islamic countries. And we were having this question actually, is it coming from the doctrine or not? So the answer is in the video below.
Absolutely, because purity, sexual purity is very important value in all religion, even on moral, simple moral human. We have to treat women equally, but traditional religions were trying or mostly blaming women for the problem, and the Islam worse than any other religion, because in Judaism it was developing very gradually through time to something that close to our concepts of equal gender way of thinking, etc. So now let's go back to those. So Mamdani represents for them, the pure, so to speak, the pure world, or the pure concept of the pure non-American, which is non-pure, because America is non-pure, because America, the United States, is imperialist. Why?
From the perspective of those 30% of the Jews, when you try to,
it's part of the auto-shaming. It's like auto-anti-Semitism. There was a famous for me, because I'm a historian, not famous, Eleonora Sterling. She was a historian. She was studying. I'm talking about 70 years ago or 40 years ago. I don't remember. Never mind. She was studying anti-Semitism, because the term anti-Semitism was coined in Europe, in Germany, actually in 1879. So when a sharp historian, when he sees a new term that speaks about very traditional phenomena, hating Jews, so he must ask himself, what is the difference between what Wilhelm Marr, this was the German liberal that invented and the term anti-Semitism in 1870, he coined the term 1879, he was describing his way of disdaining Jews in other terms than the Catholic Church 1,000 years before. So Eleonora Sterling started to dig into anti-Semitism, but after very short digging, she found that Jews in Germany are adopting anti-Semitism not as a label, but as a fact. They were saying, yes, they are right. Jews are this, and Jews are that, and Jews are lazy, and Jews are horny, and Jews are filthy, or Jews are whatever this anti-Semite. So she was amazed. One thing is when, because people are tending to explain anti-Semitism is stemming from ignorance. I was stationed in Argentina 30 years.
There's some psychological background too. I think if you would like to ask a psychologist,
there are many. So, but let me be clear. It's also part of my education. My tendency until, let's say, 5 or 10 years ago was to adopt this way, because if it's question of ignorance, so the solution is simple. Let's teach the people who are the real Jews, and they will stop being anti-Semite. If it's a psychology, so let's take them to the shrink. No, it goes deeper. This is what Eleonora Sterling was stunned about. How come the Jews, liberal Jews in Germany, 19th century Germany, are adopting the concepts? In the case of them, it's not ignorance nor psychology. It's maybe what you said before about the Christians within Muslim society. It's a mutation of the minority mentality. But in the 19th century, it's in Germany, it's even worse, because, and from Germany 19th century, we can jump to New York 21st century. Here in Germany in 19th century, late 19th century in Germany, we are Jews, we are equal citizens. Hence, the right thing for Jew to do is stop being Jew. This is exactly the core value of political Islam.
Aren't we going this direction now worldwide? More like that, because now I spoke with some people who are not involved in our activities to speak about political Islam, and I heard from them, and I heard from other people that now to introduce yourself that you are coming from Israel in some countries, like in Germany and other places, it's starting to be a problem. Because if you are saying I'm coming from Israel or I'm Jewish, it starts to be a label they don't want to get. Is it incredible? No, is it incredible? Actually, if we buy into that today in this world, and if the Jews of the world are starting to doubt their identity, being afraid to show themselves to I haven't believed that it is possible in Germany in 21st century that people, the Jews, would be actually afraid to show their nationality or their background.
Yeah, but here we're talking about something goes beyond, much far and beyond, because we're talking about outspoken, proud Jews in New York. They're not hiding the Judaism, all the way around. They said, because we are Jews, we are supporting this candidate. So some of them would say, come on, mayor, what a mayor is doing, cleaning the streets and dealing with taxi strikes. Or
it's a symbol. It's a symbol.
So the more sophisticated of them that knows a little bit of history goes back to the times of Herzl. Herzl was living in a little city known as Vienna. Vienna back then in the late 19th century was a paradise for anti-Semitism, as well as it was a paradise for Jewish culture and Jewish science and Jewish music and Jewish art and Jewish. There's no way you can understand Vienna in the 19th century without all those Jews intellectuals. But on this very same token, it was a paradise for anti-Semitism. And the fact is that Karl Lueger, later you can Google him, you can Wikipedia him. He was a candidate for being a mayor of Vienna, and he was running upon an anti-Semite platform. Now, I don't know if Jews voted for him or not, but in the moment that he became mayor, he forgot all about his anti-Semitism, and he was dealing with things that a mayor deals with. So the New York Jews of today, some of them would say, look at Karl Lueger, don't make so much noise, also Netanyahu, or even Erdogan, or any political leader in the world of the 21st century with TikTok and Twisted and Facebook, etc. So, social media, you have to be a little bit, crazy. Look at Trump. Look at Milei in Argentina. Look at Johnson in the U.S. With the hair. So Netanyahu at least have a tie. So don't take those words for such a. Don't take it so seriously.
What you would say?
This would be one version, but the other version, with first version, I can live. I think it's stupid, but I can live with it because okay, let's see. The other version is all the way around. They said, no. Mamdani represents his biography, his rhetorics. He is a symbol of the thing that America should do, should clean itself from the impurity of 300 or 400 or 200 or 100 years of imperialism, of interventionism in Afghanistan until 2 years ago, and in Chile 50 years ago with Salvador Allende, and in Cuba with Fidel Castro, and all over the place, all over wherever you throw a stone, you will find American intervention. And when people are saying, but China also knows, so those New York Jews would say, yes, but China is not saying we are the best, we are the heroes, we are saving the world, we are exceptional, American exceptionalism. So there's no expectations, there's no big talk, high talk. They're not trying, Chinese or Russians, Putin is not trying to put himself on a higher moral ground vis-a-vis Americans that from Washington, and from Madison, from Jefferson, from Lincoln, it's Wilson, okay, to talk about the 20th century, or not to mention Ronald Reagan or Obama, and who not, except Trump, which is crazy, but the rest of them, all the presidents, and the culture, the American culture, Hollywood, we are saving the world. And so, when in fact you're impurifying the world, you're ruining the world with your imperialism.
So that's the idea you think they have, or you studied it yourself? Have you had some conversations with them, or?
Of course, if you can hear it in podcasts, you can hear it in the social media, you can the self-hatred,
self-destructive
mechanism of many Americans, not only Jews, of course, and not all Jews, of course. I think I'm an optimistic person. Being a Jew and a Zionist, I'm optimistic. So sometimes I'm lying to myself and I'm telling myself, come on, it's not that bad. I mean, it's a small minority, and of course, there's no way. I told you the crystal ball broke, and I don't know the future. There is a scholar in Israel. Maybe you should interview him. His name is Dan Shiftan. He's from Jewish German origin, so he have very special family name, Shuftan. It's written with many letters, and he knows quite well German, but he speaks English perfectly, of course, Hebrew. So he says it's very good news. What happened in New York in the last week is very good news, because the mutation of the radical liberal wokeism is arriving to a point of no return. I mean, this is the farmost point bridge this movement can arrive. Now, most Democrats, let alone Republicans, will wake up from the wokeism and start to repair, to rearrange, American mindset, political mindset.
It's also incredible how many Republicans are supporting in the United States, actually, the delegitimization of Israel, or that it's actually interesting, because always Islam people always say there is a coalition between political Islam and the left, but there is of course a coalition also from the Islamic point of view, with the right. And why? Because of course the Islamic values on the surface on the surface may seem similar to the conservative values
Conservative.
until you dig deeper.
Of
Yeah,
course.
it's like family, it's important. Okay, what does it mean to have a family? Women, where is the man, where is the woman? Nobody speaks about that. Nobody speaks about 4 wives. Nobody speaks about the possibility to marry a woman, or female, I would say, as of the age of 6 and consummate the marriage as of the age of 9, as Muhammad did himself. So that's not actually so conservative from the Western point of view, you know? But that's usually what's not being spoken about. So I think this coalition is being tried. The Islamic movements are trying to build up those coalitions with political right and left, which is smart, I have to say.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me add one element, one brilliant element, because as I said before, and we must repeat it over and over again, from the Arab point of view, the state of Israel is an invasion into the Arab land, Arab space, so to speak, which starts in Morocco and ends in the Gulf. So how for them, how it's even impossible? Because of imperialism. Okay, now let's go back to the very, very extreme right in the US. This is exactly what they are blaming Jewish lobby, AIPAC, and Israel and Zionism. You are dragging us into your filthy wars. You dragged us to the first Gulf War, and you dragged us to the second Gulf War, and now you made us to participate in the bombing of Iran, supposedly nuclear, which is their doubt, or others would say it's a very good thing, because why not? Why only the US should have a nuclear weapon if we're talking about equality? So you see those distortions. So from this point of view, you have another element of the coalition that you mentioned, because for Arabs, Zionism and imperialism, and for the right wing of the Republican Party, Jews and the Jewish lobby and the state of Israel, and especially this specific prime minister that we have, that is very eloquent and is know his ways with the media, and he visited the Congress vis-a-vis Obama rejection. So all those Jewish elements are dragging, are influencing, are pulling the US away from the promise of make America great again, which means for them going back to the Monroe Doctrine of the 19th century. America for itself, we don't have anything to do with the great world, with the bigger world. Islam is a problem of the Middle East. So you have here another element which makes things
really interesting.
Yeah,
it's really interesting that specifically that it's so smart and adaptable system, political Islam, that it can use the strengths as well as weaknesses of the political left and political right alike. And we actually, as you said on the beginning, the knowledge is completely important, that people understand what actually is political Islam, how it works. Otherwise, they start to make collaborations and allies on the wrong places, which actually can then lead to self-destruct mechanism of the country itself. I was thinking, we was just speaking before the podcast, that it's usually labeled as a Israel-Arab conflict, or Jews-Arab conflict, or Arab-Jewish conflict, or Arab-Israeli conflict. What we in CSPII labeling it's political Islam versus the Jews, because the idea, you can exchange any country. So if you would now have the possibility to shuffle the map and you would put Israel, I don't know, as a neighboring country to Malaysia, or choose any place, or let's exchange the neighbors, it would be still the same problem, because it's in the scriptures. The scriptures you cannot change. You cannot change the biography of Muhammad, what he did with the Jews and why he did it. So it's a problem of political Islam, because it will never go away. So it's usually, what we're trying to do is to bring it from supposing the ethnical problem or a regional or territorial into ideological, because the problem is at its core, the cause of the causes.
Yeah.
The initial cause is the Islamic doctrine itself. I mean, that's the approach what we are having. Yeah. I don't know how you are explaining it in your own words when you are specifically speaking about this Arab-Israeli conflict. But if you read into the Charter of Hamas, if you read in the Treaty of Umar, as you said, if you go into the Islamic scriptures and you just read it in, it's all there. It's all there. 7th of October, you see what all the jihadis were doing. It's purely according to the Islamic doctrine. Islamic State, according to the Islamic doctrine. And then people are saying, yeah, but, many Islamic parties are killing a lot of Muslims. This is true. That's what we are saying, that they are the first victims. Because, and the reason is it jihad of purification, because one party evaluates another party as not Islamic enough, and therefore they have to go, and they are being killed. So it's a human tragedy, if you think about this, yeah? But let's go back to your expertise, or you can say anything what you want.
I wanted to add on this perspective of this fantasy, not fantasy, but the speculation that you make if Israel was neighbor of Indonesia or Mali or any other. So we historians, I'm talking about myself. I'm not talking about in the name of any union, but history is about first of all about reality. And the reality is that the state of Israel is in the land of Israel. And the fact is that all those political movements against Israel, starting not with the Hamas, obviously, start with the PLO, or better put, I mean, in the time of the state of Israel from 1948, no question that the PLO, that was, many Israelis doesn't know Israelis, my neighbors. They don't know that the covenant of the PLO was written in 1964, and I'm telling them with my strange sense of humor that since I'm an historian, I'm very bad in math, so I'm not sure if 1964 is before or after 1967, after the occupation. So I have a very special Excel machinery that I asked my very brilliant computer engineer to make for me, a stupid historian, in order to be sure that 1964 is before and not after 1967, which means that not the settlements, the Jewish settlements in the so-called West Bank are the cause of the PLO, but all the way around. And if you read this covenant of 1964, you don't have to read the Hamas covenant because it's the same, okay, so there's more ingredients in the Hamas because they're putting more emphasis about, on the political Islam as such. But the PLO covenant is clearly saying that the goal of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, okay, is to harness all the Arab nations and all Arab people in order to destroy the state of Israel. And those Arabs, especially Arab leaders that are not putting themselves to the mission, are executable by definition and as a obligation of any Arab. So every leader that signs peace treaty, which I would say it's not, it's maybe a treaty, but it's not peace, not in the biblical term, not in the common sense term, but never mind. Let's say that if Israel signed an agreement with Egypt in 1979, and if Israel signed an agreement with Jordan in 1994, by definition of the PLO and the Hamas, is that both the regimes of Egypt and Jordan are executables, should be eliminated. And
but
even
also one thing, which is called Hudna. It's a Sharia codified principle that none of the peace treaties, as Mohammed did himself, he closed the peace treaty and then he broke it himself with the Jews, and he broke it after 10 years. So practically you can see sometimes Yasser Arafat speaking about that specific treaty. And it's interesting that it's still being considered because it's a part of the Shariatic experience, and also it's a part of it's codified. You can actually make a peace treaty with a non-Islamic nation. The validity can be broken by the Sharia and by the primary Islamic doctrine. You can go Google Hudna, or you can Google the speech of Yasser Arafat when he spoke specifically about the Oslo Accords, why he was signing them.
And then even Shimon Peres, back then Israeli foreign ministry, even him yelled because he was a great believer in Arafat. Because Shimon Peres was one of, we talked before about self-deception Jews in New York today, but Shimon Peres was a convinced Zionist, fervent Zionist. He was helper of David Ben-Gurion. You don't need more than that. He's in charge. He was in charge of making the Israeli army quite equipped in the 1950s because of his agreements with France. Quite impressive guy. Nevertheless, because you understand, after such a lovely introduction, I'm going to name him names. In 1993, he was a great believer in Yasser Arafat because there is a new Middle East that is coming, rising from the horizon, because in 1991 the Cold War was over, and in 1990 there was a coalition. 1991 there was a coalition led by the good ones, by the Americans, with the participations of even Argentina in the very far west and Arab countries in the very near east against the evil. So the good ones, it's like Manichaeism. It's like the philosophy of the older Persians, Manichaeism, the good and the bad. It's like Hollywood movies, the black and the white, or the Hobbit, Sauron the bad and the Hobbit the good. So now we have a coalition of the good guys. So Arafat is going to be the good guy. Why? Listen to this, one of the arguments of Shimon Peres. Okay, because the young Arab women are giving attention to the way they look. They want to fit into those nice jeans, whereas their mothers that were living upon a traditional way of thinking didn't care about the way they look. So the young generation, the young Arab women, are the symbol of the new Middle East that is coming out from the horizon in 1993. Hence, usually he was, looking for the other side when Arafat was Hudnaizing the Oslo Accords, explaining in English, in Arabic, to his crowd. Listen, we were talking about reading the Quran. What Muhammad did, now it's our turn. We're going to embrace every achievement, and if we, Arafat, we are going to sit in Ramallah. It's 20 kilometers, even less than Jerusalem. It's better than to sit in Tunis. And who brought me back from Tunis to Ramallah? Shimon Peres. So I'll play the game. So even after Johannesburg speech, even Peres was yelling at Arafat and telling him, what are you doing? You're ruining everything. And Arafat told him, no, don't take it too seriously. It's things that I have to say to my crowd. So you see that this way of the sitting all the time, it's playing, it's mind games. Now, my conclusion, because I don't know if we have more time, but I want to
I think we spoke more and longer than we intended initially, but it is interesting. I actually have one question for you for the closing statement. What would you suggest to the Jews worldwide? What would you suggest to the leadership of the State of Israel? And what would you suggest to Jews living abroad? So that's two questions. And I would like to say one more thing, because what I would like to say to all the people is that you have to understand that the State of Israel is an example. It's some kind of lakmus paper of the world, how the things are happening. It's actually a template. That's an Islamic masterclass, how the territories are being taken over and eliminated and turned into Islamic ones. So it's happening now in Europe. It's not seen yet so vividly. In some countries, yes, like Germany, UK, and France. It's happening in the US, and the only difference between United States, Germany, UK, and any other country you can think which is non-Islamic, and Afghanistan, or choose any other Islamic country. You can choose Libya now, or you can choose Egypt, is just in time. So from my perspective, is the understanding of the Islamic doctrine is very important, And before you say something about the Statute of Israel, please study and give to your friends, and give them this video, and give the video of the colleague which is in the description, and teach them about the history of political Islam versus the Jews. It's very, very important. We have to understand that, yeah? That this is not an isolated incident with Israel. This is a global movement which started 1,400 years ago to dominate the world. And if you don't believe that, you can go, and I repeat it many times, it's an organization called OIC, Organization of Islamic Cooperation, and look on the logo of this organization. It collects all of the Islamic countries. And actually there is the whole world. In the middle of the world is the Kaaba, and the crescent of the moon is actually encircling the whole world. So that's the final Islamic political vision. Yeah, so it's not just the Arab countries, Islamic Arab countries, but it's all the Islamic countries, because it's part of the Islamic doctrine. So that's my closing statement. I wanted to tell it because that's important when we speak about different organizations, to also bring it to the global level. Israel is an example. It's a masterclass where we can learn and watch and support. Yeah. Okay, so what's your closing statement?
My closing statement is, I like this term. Having said that, having said all what you said about political Islam and the deceptions and the tricks and the mind games, etc., 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 one might be very pessimistic. Say, okay, let's commit suicide, and that's it. And my conclusion is all the way around. I mean, on the one hand, there's no way, as a Jew, as a human being that was raised within a liberal mindset, my parents, my grandparents, and my neighbors, my friends, etc. And of course, I traveled quite extensively in the world. In Europe, I've been in Argentina and the US and Canada, etc. So I meet people that are sharing me the same values of liberalism, okay? Live and let live, let's have a beer, let's watch a football game, whatever. I mean, so let's live life. We know that we are not going to be here forever. Let's try to be as good as possible. Americans, they have a very old America from the 18th century, the slogan, be good, help your neighbor. No, work hard, be good, help your neighbor. No, it's like the ethics of the industrious American farmer. Work hard because you have to work hard. No one will give you anything. Be good to your cows, to your dog, obviously to your family, and help your neighbor, and that's it. So it's not that complicated, and those values are in the Bible. So on the one hand, I will never give up the dream and the necessity to thrive towards peace in the real sense of the word. On the other hand, I must not be stupid. I must learn. I must understand what is going on. We have to be strong. And being strong, people usually said, so we have to buy more weapons and more airplanes, and maybe to make more sophisticated weapons. And I said, yes, obviously, but it doesn't start there, because we're talking about tools. An airplane is a tool, and the weapon is a tool, and the intelligence is a tool, and the cyber attacks is a tool. What is the core of the issue is to understand the deep roots of who are you before analyzing political Islam. Because I heard yesterday a brilliant YouTube lecture in the YouTube by a Canadian Jew by the name of Raphael Shore, Shore. He's the brother of David Shore that created House, the famous TV series House, with Hugh Laurie as a crazy doctor. So this Raphael Shore is thanking anti-Semites. He's thanking anti-Semites because he said they oblige us to understand the deep core of the conflict. And the deep core of the conflict, it goes directly to your arguments about political Islam. Because political Islam, people might think, okay, so it's politics. Trump is a politician, Boris Johnson was a politician, Netanyahu was so politics stinks. No, in this case, we're talking about a worldview. Just like Hitler had a worldview Weltanschlussung. I don't remember how you say it in German. It's a very long, very important word concept. He had a vision of a world where people are not disturbing one another with social services and social care and the Jewish, what he considered Jewish values. Help the poor, help the weak, be good. No, he was social Darwinist. The same applies to political Islam. The concept is to surrender to Allah. This is Islam. One of the biggest lies of Muslims, of political Islam, is that they're playing with the word, because Islam sounds like salam, and salam, it's like Hebrew shalom, and shalom is peace. So they're saying, we are the religion of peace. No, 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 no. The peace you're talking about, and it's written in the Quran hundreds of times, is surrender. Surrender, give up,
Submission.
Submission, submit yourself. The very concept, the very opposite concept of liberalism. Make with yourself in the 50 or 60 or 100 years that you were given on this earth, make the best of yourself, be the best musician, be the best football player, be the best lover, be the best parent. For me, it's the most important thing, be the best parent, because I'm Jewish, and for me, this when my son called me father, it's like the highest level that I can imagine. But this is my, so no, the Islam wants me to submit myself to Allah, and he calls those who doesn't submit, and he describes what is the way of submission, kafir, which means in the best case you'll be like second level citizen, in the worst case will eliminate you. So this is the clash between concepts. It's not even between civilizations in the Huntington concept of the world of about 30 years ago, Michael Huntington, The Clash of Civilizations. It goes beyond. That's why political Islam is so dangerous, because they going to the very, very core of human experience. There's a clash between two concepts of human experience. Be yourself or null yourself.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Udi, for this great podcast. I think we should repeat it, and we should go into different topics. We discussed it. If we do more series, we spoke about this with Udi, that we will do it today more broad, that we will just take and snippets. And also, please write under the section what topics you would like to hear from Udi, and we can feature again Udi next time if you are interested, and speak with him about his experience and his research. Udi, thank you so much again. You are courageous, very courageous man, to speak about things with, okay, we have people in Israel speaking about what you speak, but it's far from mainstream. And I wish very deeply that that would be what's coming out of your mouth, specifically connected to political Islam, would also come out of the mouths of the variety of the politicians, not only in Israel, but also abroad, and that your knowledge will become more wider known, and also that the Jews around the world will be understanding, not necessarily supporting every single policy of the state of Israel. That's not the case. We don't spoke about that, and that's not even the idea. The idea is to understand, is Israel a valid state, yes or no, and what is the cause of all the current conflict, and also, should I support the Israelis in the statehood or not? Yeah, and that's the thing. That's the idea, what we're trying to bring over. And also to understand that the conflict is primarily ideological.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Till next time.
See you next time.
Bye.
Bye-bye.